Researcher notes. When I heard the story about that girl, I immediately felt excited. After all, I had similar experiences with my son. As a child, he was often sick, and every time he had a high fever, it happened more than 10 times. He would suddenly get out of bed, as if he didn't notice me, pushing me away like an unnecessary object. His gaze became alien, and it seemed as if he didn't recognize me at all. My son looked terrified, trying to escape, as if someone else had taken over his body. He was panicking, screaming something unintelligible. I can't remember the exact words. I had to hold him down as hard as I could, because it was incredibly creepy. After a few minutes, he would slowly come back to himself. His eyes would become dear again, and he would start to calm down. He remembered some of what had happened, but because of his small age, he couldn't really explain. He only said that there were creatures flickering around him, and he was very scared. He even feared that such visions might return. Interestingly, he did not remember how he had tried to escape or what he had said. He had the impression that someone else was controlling him at those moments. I will remember those eyes forever, because all this happened. By the way, I often read stories like this in the comments, about how someone met someone they knew, talked to them, and then it turns out that this person either literally died recently or has been dead for a long time. And I'll also add, when I first heard that the heart is in the middle of the chest, I was very surprised. After all, we, children from ordinary Soviet schools, were taught that the heart is on the left. Now it's in the middle. There is even a version that the heart is called that because it is in the middle of the chest. From the Russian word for middle, center, I would like to touch on one more topic. One more inconsistency from my personal memories. This Mandela effect has already been written about in the comments on this channel. In the famous movie, The Adventures of Pinocchio, I personally remember Basilio the cat with a sign that said, blind. Now, on all the pictures that are found on the internet, Basilio's plate with the correct inscription, without the mistake. As it turns out, this mistake is not only I remember. Again, on the internet, there is a photo where people in the costume of Basilio, and they deliberately repeat that sign with a mistake. They have the E corrected to an E. I wonder how many of us there are transported to this reality who remember all those inconsistencies. And yes, from my recollection, Mandela died a long time ago. Back in the 80s, we were told in school about him and the oppression of blacks in South Africa. I even collected signatures in support of Nelson Mandela. We, school children, went to houses that were near our school with a text that said about detention centers and genocide. It was an unfamiliar word to me at the time, but I realized that we were doing something very important. It was around 88. I want to share my story in response to the question asked. It's about how someone else ended up in my child's body. Recently, a very unusual incident happened. It was about 2 a.m. when my daughter suddenly stirred and woke up. Her sleep is usually deep, without any nightmares, but this time she opened her eyes wide and stared into the void. I turned on the light a little and tried to find out what had woken her up. My daughter remained silent, staring off into the distance. I remembered that once she had woken up and said that it was all just a dream, but she looked quite happy and soon went back to sleep. So I asked again, "Are you asleep?" There was no answer, only widened eyes of horror. I continued to reassure her, telling her that her mom was nearby, that she was at home and everything was fine. But instead of reassurance, the girl became more and more frightened. In her look read real horror. So I asked her, "Do you see something scary?" I wanted to increase the lights to reduce the fear, but she whispered,
"You need more light."
I then inquired if she recognized her room. She shook her head in the negative. The next question asked if she knew where she was and if she would recognize me. Again, the negative gesture. I felt a growing unease, but decided to check the last one. What's your name? The answer came out of the blue. This name did not match my daughter's name in any way. I was completely confused, realizing that in front of me sat a strange and very frightened child. Then I decided to try to calm her down and convince her to go back to sleep. I told her that she would wake up in her house in the morning and everything would be fine. I promised to protect her from any threats and promised that I would gently pet her until she fell asleep. In the morning, of course, my real daughter had no memory of the incident. This incident reinforced my belief that we can be anywhere and anyone in our dream. Our 3-year-old boy suddenly cried one night before going to bed. My husband and I hurried to his nursery, trying our best to comfort him. When we entered, the little one began to tell a strange story. I used to be big, just like you and my dad. I was an officer and burned in a tank trying to save my comrade. The boy described in detail the tank, a large car with an extended gun barrel ahead, as if it were a living memory. Then he remembered a military uniform similar to the one worn by soldiers of the Red Army before the start of the Great Patriotic War. Such memories seemed surprising, because such things were seen only in the old family photos of my ancestors, many of whom served in the armed forces. The son continued the story. First, he pulled out one soldier. Then he decided to go back for another comrade, but the car caught fire and both died. Upon hearing this, my heart choked with pain, but we tried to distract the child by turning our attention to something else. But after a while, the boy cried again, repeating now a completely different story. I served at the border, rode on a white horse, and the enemies attacked, killing us all. These revelations shocked us, but given our familiarity with the concepts of reincarnation, we accepted the situation calmly, understanding the seriousness of his son's experiences. 4 years passed. Our life was going its own way. Once the whole family gathered for an evening meeting of guests. I was ready before the others, decided to wash the remaining dirty cups in the sink because I cannot stand leaving dirty dishes at home. Suddenly, my son came up behind me, gently hugged me, and said quietly, "Mommy, I promise to help you everywhere and always. Washing dishes, vacuuming, cleaning, but please don't send me to the army." Having heard such sincere words from the little boy, I gave myself my word that no one else of our family would go to war. For every branch of my family and my second half of the ages was made up exclusively of military officers. But if there are enough dead soldiers among our loved ones, it is time to put an end to this forever. The first episode took place in the summer of 2018. About 6 o'clock in the evening, my husband and I returned home after visiting friends. It was warm, quiet, and cozy. Strolling through the streets of his hometown, my husband enthusiastically talked about changing the car, naming different brands, and model characteristics. To be honest, conversations about cars had long since ceased to fascinate me, and thoughts gradually began to wander away from his narrative. And suddenly, something unusual happened. All of a sudden, I found myself with my husband in a strange city abroad. Perhaps it was Spain or Greece, a small seaside town with 2-story mansions and the flavors of southern summer. The husband looked irritated, birched that he did not want to stay in this country at all, and I myself was boiling with discontent, feeling literally angry. The dispute between us began regarding the choice of apartment for living. The husband resented the size of the apartment, offered to limit it to 2 rooms, but I categorically objected, considering necessary to take into account the possible presence of guests. It was then that the mysterious expression came out, "If they come, where shall we live?" This dialogue lasted only a few seconds, until it suddenly ended and brought me back to the reality of my hometown. It took me a few moments to realize what had happened, and as I walked 20 meters with my husband, I realized that I was alone. The husband was genuinely pleased with what I said, saying that I had been there for him all along. The second unusual incident happened much later, on January 2 of this year. When I woke up in the morning, I complained to my husband that I was tired from the city mud and the wasteland around me, and I offered him to go and rest in sunny Crimea. Because the holidays were rather modest, the collections took a minimum of time, and already at 7 o'clock in the morning, we started on our way. The road to the peninsula was a real find thanks to the excellent highway, providing a comfortable journey. The mood of both was uplifted, despite the morning cold air and a small temperature of about 8 degrees of heat. Waiting for the Crimean sun warmed the desire to be more quickly in place. But suddenly the atmosphere changed. A gray sky was hanging over the road. A small rain drizzled. However, this did not spoil the mood, as the road remained empty, almost deserted. No one in their right mind would have set out to travel on the 2nd of January. The driver confidently drove the car at a speed of exactly 100 kilometers per hour. The music played as usual loud, creating a pleasant atmosphere. And here is the surprise. There was a sharp crack, as if we were facing some obstacle, accompanied by the sound of cracked plastic. However, there were no noticeable blows, not even a slight concussion. Everything happened instantly, leaving us bewildered and confused. After a short discussion, we decided to stop to find out the cause of the noise. Coming out of the car, saw that our right fog light is turned and torn from the root. There are only 2 thin wires hanging from the attachment. It seemed incredible how such an incident could have happened without obvious external factors. We turned the car around and spent 5 long minutes searching carefully for a lost headlight along the road, but could not find anything. It disappeared without a trace, as if it had vanished into thin air. We have not found a single branch capable of causing such damage, or even traces of asphalt irregularities that could lead to such an outcome. Given the laws of aerodynamics, it seemed impossible for the headlamp to slip out by itself due to the pressure of the opposing wind. After discussing the accident, we went back to the road, rejoicing in the return of sunlight and hoping that the rest will go well. Buying a new headlight completed this bizarre episode, leaving a lot of questions unanswered.